Favorite thing about being a dad?
When my kids stand outside and wait for me to get home from work, and whenever I get out of the vehicle, they yell, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!"
The hum of a car dealership is a specific kind of music. It's the sound of doors clicking shut, the low murmur of negotiations, and the occasional burst of laughter from a break room. For Matt Traywick, this was the soundtrack of his professional life at Vaden Nissan in Savannah. But Matt wasn't just another face in a suit. He was a powerhouse. To understand the tragedy that unfolded on January 4th, you first have to understand the man who was lost, not as a statistic, but as a pillar of his community. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Matthew was 33 years old, an age where most men are just beginning to find their stride. He had found his long ago. At Vaden Automotive, he was legendary for his work ethic. In the high-pressure world of automotive sales, most professionals are happy to move 15 or 20 units a month. In June of 2021, Matthew blew those numbers out of the water, selling an incredible 62 vehicles. That wasn't just luck. It was a testament to his personality. He was described by those who worked with him as having a heart and wisdom that guided every interaction. He didn't just sell cars, he built relationships. He was the guy who remembered your kids' names, the guy who smiled through the longest shifts, and the guy who wore his success with a quiet, humble pride. But the dealership was just where he worked. His real life started the moment he clocked out. Matthew was a devoted husband to Michaela and a father to 3 very young children. On the day he died, his world consisted of a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn just 8 weeks old. Those children were his why. In videos shared by his employer, Matthew spoke about the simple joy of coming home to hear his children scream, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," as he pulled into the driveway. It was a life built on the foundations of hard work and unconditional love. On that Sunday in early January, the air in Savannah was typical for the season, cool enough for a light jacket, but bright enough to draw people out of their homes. It was a day for errands, for preparing for the coming week. The Traywick family headed to the Target on Abercorn Street, a standard weekend routine for thousands of Georgians. They were a portrait of the American dream. A successful young father, a supportive wife, and 3 children tucked safely into their car seats. The Target parking lot in the 14,000 block of Abercorn is massive, flanked by other major retailers and constantly pulsing with traffic. It is a place of convenience, a place where people go to check items off a list. As Matthew navigated the rows of parked cars, he was looking for a spot, a mundane task that we all perform without a second thought. He didn't know that he was pulling into the orbit of a man who viewed the world through a much darker lens. He didn't know that a simple piece of asphalt was being claimed by someone who was prepared to kill for it. As Matthew began to steer his vehicle toward an open space, the ordinary Sunday afternoon began to warp into something unrecognizable, leaving witness after witness to ask the same question. How could a moment so small lead to a loss so massive? For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. At approximately 4:10 p.m., the atmosphere at the Southside Target shifted from commerce to carnage. The dispute was instantaneous. According to reports from the Savannah Police Department and accounts from terrified shoppers, the confrontation centered on a single parking space. In the high-stress environment of a crowded lot, tempers often flare, but what happened between Matthew Traywick and 30-year-old Tyler Edward Linn was not a typical shouting match. Witnesses described a scene that escalated with breathtaking speed. Words were exchanged, the kind of sharp, reactive barbs that happen when 2 people feel disrespected in a public space. But while Matthew was there with his family, focused on a shopping trip, his counterpart was allegedly armed and ready for a confrontation. Within seconds of the initial disagreement, the sound of gunfire tore through the parking lot. 3 shots were fired in rapid succession. The impact was immediate. Matthew Traywick fell to the pavement. The silence that followed the shots was perhaps more terrifying than the noise itself. Michaela Traywick, suddenly thrust into a nightmare, didn't hesitate. She rushed to her husband's side, her hands pressing against his wounds in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. Eyewitnesses on platforms like Reddit and local news outlets described the heartbreaking sight of a wife begging her husband to keep breathing, to stay with her, to not let go. While the life was draining out of Matthew, the behavior of the shooter, Tyler Linn, became the focal point of the horror. He didn't flee the scene. He didn't scream or show signs of immediate panic. Instead, he reportedly performed a series of actions that suggested a chilling level of detachment. He took the magazine out of his handgun, placed it on the roof of his vehicle, and stepped back. He stood there, a silent observer to the chaos he had just unleashed, waiting for the authorities to arrive. Panic rippled through the target. Shoppers who had been looking at electronics or household goods were suddenly told to stay back as police cruisers swarmed the 14,000 block of Abercorn. Officers found Matthew in critical condition and a suspect who was compliant to the point of being eerie. As the ambulance sped away toward Memorial Health University Medical Center, the parking lot was transformed. The yellow tape went up, the evidence markers were placed near the shell casings, and the realization began to sink in. 3 children had just watched their father be gunned down over a parking spot. The police department's tweets that evening were sparse but heavy. They confirmed an adult male had been shot and that a suspect was in custody. But as the sun set over Savannah, the community began to look closer at the man who had remained so calm after such a violent act. The investigation was only beginning, and as detectives started to pull on the threads of Tyler Linn's life, they found a history that suggested this wasn't the first time he had turned a minor slight into a major confrontation. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Who is Tyler Edward Linn? That was the question on everyone's mind as his mugshot began to circulate. The 30-year-old suspect wasn't a career criminal in the traditional sense, but his background provided a roadmap to the events at target. Linn had served in the United States Army for 8 years, from August 2015 to October 2023. During the final 2 years of his service, he was stationed at Hunter Army Airfield in nearby Hinesville, Georgia. His military occupational specialty was unmanned aircraft systems repairer. He was a specialist, a rank that implies technical proficiency. His job was to maintain the complex drones that the military uses for surveillance and strikes. It was a role that required precision, following checklists, and maintaining a cool head under technical pressure. However, there was a glaring gap in his record that forensic psychiatrists and investigators would later find significant. Tyler Linn had never been deployed. He had no combat experience, no history of being under fire in a foreign theater. This detail complicates the narrative of military trauma. While some might assume his procedural behavior after the shooting, clearing the magazine and waiting for police, was the result of combat training, others argue it suggested a different kind of psychological makeup. Was this a man who simply viewed the world as a series of protocols to be followed, even when those protocols involved ending a life? Outside of his military service, a more volatile picture began to emerge. Though official court records in Chatham County didn't show a long list of prior arrests, the court of public opinion on social media brought forward individuals who claimed to know him. They described a man with a hair-trigger temper, particularly behind the wheel. There were allegations of road rage incidents where Linn would reportedly follow drivers who had pissed him off or intentionally slam on his brakes to cause a collision. One individual claimed he had even physically confronted people in the past, always acting as though he were the victim of someone else's poor driving. This concept, known in psychology as hostile attribution bias, describes a state where an individual interprets ambiguous actions as intentionally hostile. To someone like Linn, a car cutting him off or someone taking his parking space isn't an accident. It's a personal attack that demands a response. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober noted that when this mindset is combined with the presence of a firearm, the result is often lethal. As Linn sat in the Chatham County Jail, charged with murder and aggravated assault, he was held without bail. His first court appearance was scheduled for January 29th. The legal system began to weigh his military background and his lack of a prior criminal record against the sheer senselessness of the act. But while the lawyers argued over reactive aggression and emotional regulation, the city of Savannah was focusing on the void left behind. The suspect was behind bars, but the true cost of his protocol was being measured in the grief of a widow and the silence of a house that used to be full of laughter. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. In the days following January 4th, the target on Abercorn Street attempted to return to normal, but for the city of Savannah, nothing was the same. The death of Matthew Traywick became a catalyst for a conversation about gun violence and the madness of modern society. Mayor Van Johnson spoke for many when he said that no disagreement over a parking space should ever end in the loss of life. But words could not bring back the man who had sold 62 cars in a single month. The Vaden Automotive family led the way in honoring their lost brother. They posted photos of Matthew, not as a victim, but as a man holding a cake, celebrating a milestone, and smiling with the kind of genuine warmth that can't be faked for a camera. They reminded the public that Matthew was more than the headline of a tragedy. He was a professional who brought heart to a profession often viewed as cynical. His absence at the dealership left a physical gap that his colleagues struggled to navigate. The most overwhelming response, however, came from the community at large. A GoFundMe page, set up to support Michaela and the 3 children, became a testament to Matthew's impact. In less than 24 hours, it surpassed $130,000. People who had never met the Traywicks donated $5, $10, and $100, often leaving comments about how the story had broken their hearts. They spoke about their own children, about the fear of a world where a trip to Target could be fatal, and about the need to support a mother who was now facing the impossible task of raising 3 children alone. The logistics of the family's future are daunting. With a newborn only 2 months old, Michaela's life has been upended in a way that is difficult to fathom. The community has rallied with meal trains and daily assistance, but the new normal is a somber one. As Dr. Bober pointed out, grief of this magnitude isn't an on and off switch. It is a long, slow process of learning to live with a permanent vacancy. As of early 2026, Tyler Linn remains in custody. The legal proceedings will likely take months, if not years, to reach a conclusion. There will be mental health evaluations, arguments over self-defense versus premeditated murder, and a deep dive into those 8 years of military service. But regardless of the verdict, the facts remain unchanged. A parking space is a temporary convenience, but the loss of a father is a permanent tragedy. Matthew Traywick's story is a reminder of the fragility of the peace we take for granted. It is a call to remember the man who lived for his family, who worked with a big grin, and who simply wanted to get home to hear his kids yell "Daddy." In the end, the 62 cars he sold or the parking spot he died for are not his legacy. His legacy is the love he left behind and the community that refused to let his family fall. The case of the Target parking lot shooting is far from over, and as the trial date looms, the eyes of Georgia remain fixed on a courtroom, waiting to see how the law will answer for a life stolen in the blink of an eye. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts below. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.